A very exciting Sikha, Vayeshev, Dalit, Chelik Tezvav, Chanukah. We're learning today, we continue to learn, of course, in the Schos, that all of the Shvuyim, all of the abductees, all the Chatufim should be returned home, safe in body and in mind and in spirit. And for Refuah Shlema, for everybody who was wounded and hurt, and with a tefillah, the bottom of our hearts, that there should already be Shalom, Emes Shalom, and a Refuah Shlema Nisi for Rav Yosef Yitzchak ben Sima Chasya. And now comes the special part. We are so excited to wish a big Mazel Tov to Rachi Shem Tov, whose first grandson, Tzemach Shem Tov, became Bar Mitzvah. They are Shluchim in Montevideo in Uruguay. And to Leah Goldman, on the upsharnish of her grandson Eliyahu Goldman. They live in South Africa. And if there are any other simchas that people want to share, if you want to mute yourself and share those now, would be a good time. But we just wish each other and all of Klal Yisrael only simchas, always simchas, mit freiliche Herze, Gesundheit, freiliche. Nothing less. Anybody for a simcha to add? Okay, then we begin. The Pirish HaPasuk, in the explanation on the Pasuk V'habor reik ein bo mayim. So this is, of course, talking about Yosef being thrown into the pit, and the Pasuk says that it was empty and it had no water. Matzinu b'Gemara b'Sugya de Chanukah. So of all places, in the Sugya of Chanukah, the Gemara comments on this Pasuk. V'amar Rav Kahana Darash Rav Nosson bar Minyumi Mishmei Rabbi Tanchum. So Rab Nosson, the son of Minyumi, taught in the name of Rav Tanchum. Mai dichsiv abarek ein b'mayim, b'mashma shenem of abarek ein yodea she'ein b'mayim. He asks the question: isn't it inferred from the words that the pit was empty and didn't have water? So what do we understand from it? If it's empty, it should be that there's no water. Why does the Torah have to tell us there's no water? Elamat Talmud Leimer, but what is the pasuk trying to teach us? Ein by mayim, mayim ein by. When it says ein by mayim, it's teaching us that there's no water. Aval nechashiv akravim yesh by. But snakes and scorpions, yes, those are in the bor. And this is something that I'm guessing a lot of us are familiar with because Rashi cites this. Bipashtos. So seemingly, simply speaking, Hatam shadrash hazu al v'habor reik goimer huva b'gemara b'sugya de Chanukah. So seemingly, why does this limud come in the sugya in where Chanukah is being discussed? Because this is the way the Gemara works, that it'll bring something from one Manda Amar, from one Tana, and then it will also bundle together other teachings from that same Tana. And the Tana who taught this just before this, Amar of Kahana, Darish Rav Nosson bar Minyumi, Bishmei Rabbi Tanchum, Ner Shel Chanukah v'chulei. So this same sage taught something regarding Chanukah right before this. And so the Gemara follows up with bringing this limud from the same Tana. Aval kafisha kfar nizbar pamim rabbis, but the Rebbe rejects that, let's just say, casual connection, because the Rebbe teaches constantly, over and over and over again, that nothing in Torah is casual or even causal, and therefore there has to be a deeper reason. Kol ini b'Torah hu b'tachlis hadiuk. Everything in Torah is exquisitely precise. V'lachein kasher muvas b'gemara drasha b'sugya mesuyemes ein ze rak b'glal initzadi bal hamimre. So when the Gemara brings down a certain teaching in a certain tractate, this is not because of some side reason, some peripheral reason, like for instance, that a few teachings from the same person are bundled together. Ela mishum sheyesh l'drasha zu shaychus teichonis l'sugya shabahi muvas. But rather, it has to be that there is a very contextual reason and a relevance. There's a the content is connected to the tractate, to the sugya in which it is found. And so there must be something about these words, Bahabar Reik, Ve'ein Boi Mayim, and this limud, that Mayim, there's no Mayim, but there are snakes and scorpions, to the idea of Hanukkah. There has to be a connection between this teaching and Hanukkah. And for sure, in light of what the Shalah taught at the beginning of our parsha, and in general, the Rebbe constantly cites the Shalah, and we had it with Yutes Kislev, if you remember, that the Shalah says that every parsha is intrinsically connected to the Yom Tovim, the Yom Tov that falls in that parsha or in close confluence. And the Shalah wrote, "Shaparshas Vayeshev Miketz Vayigash Yesh Lahen Shaychus L'Chanukah." That these three parshas, so we're doing Vayeshev today, and then next week and the week after, all three have a Shaychus to Chanukah. Very pasuk Habar Reik Ein Boi Mayim Nemer Parshas Vayeshev. And this pasuk that we begin with, that the pit was empty and it had no water, is in Parshas Vayeshev. So there has to be a connection. Beis. Amru Chazal, our sages taught, Ein Mayim Ela Teira, that when you speak of water, there's nothing more quintessential water than Teira. Umizem muvan. From this we understand Shabbamakab Shenemar B'Teira Mayim. So wherever the Teira mentions Mayim, Hadavar Gam Merames Al Teira. So there has to be an allusion to Teira. Ubifrat bepasuk v'habarik ein by mayim, and specifically in the pasuk in our parsha, Asher mefurish b'medrash medubar by oides haTeira, and this is especially true regarding this pasuk, about which the Medrash says specifically bar reik nisreikan bar shel Yaakov, the pit of Yaakov was emptied out, ein by mayim, ein by divrei Teira shenimshulu l'mayim b'chulei. That Yaakov's pit, as it were, allegorically, was drained of water. It was drained of Torah. And this is the deeper understanding of what the Chazal taught. There was no water, there was no Torah, but there were snakes and scorpions, and we have to understand what the snakes and scorpions stand for in this allegory. And this is true specifically in light of the fact that the Medrash brings down two explanations in one after the other. Aleph, Mayim ein boyav nechashim v'akrabim yesh boy. One is that Yaakov's bar was emptied. Is what the Medrash is saying. Nisreikan bayr shel Yaakov. So the Medrash says one explanation is that there's no water, but there's snakes and scorpions. The second explanation is ein by mayim, ein by divrei Torah. When the pasuk says there's no water, it means there are no words of Torah. Behemshech zelazeh, and the Medrash brings them down in close confluence to each other, one after the other. It means, again, according to the rules that the Rebbe taught us, that there has to be an inherent connection between these two things that the Medrash teaches.
I'm sorry for interrupting. What is, maybe I missed this, what's Baro Shel Yaakov? What is that?
The Rebbe is going to explain. Well, I mean,
later on. Okay.
It means in Yaakov, it means in Yaakov's world, in Yaakov's family, in Yaakov's life. כשאדם עומד במצב שאין בו דברי תורה, אין בו מים, הרי ממילא נחשים והקרבים יש בו, ואין ממוצע ביניהם. Okay, very strong words. That when a person is standing in a situation, finds themselves in a situation where there's no Torah, ein boi mayim, then ipso facto, there are going to be snakes and scorpions, meaning there's no middle ground. Okay, so very often we hear this idea, like if you're not going up, you're going down, or the law of entropy. If you're not building it up, it's degenerating, it's falling apart. So the Rebbe says that if there's no water, there's going to be snakes and scorpions. If there's no Torah, so what does snakes and scorpions mean? Behind
Risky, the Rebbe says that you never find yourself in a situation. You put
Yes.
yourself in a situation.
I know. I as soon as I said that, I thanks. V'hainu, this means shachisaron she'im by divrei Torah ein rak bikach shehu reik mitayra, avol hu yochol lishar mole binyani harishus. So I've explained that when we say that there's a space that is empty of Torah, it's not the pshat. Okay, so there's no Torah, but in terms of divrei rishus, things that are kind of pariv, just the regular stuff, that's all okay. Everything that's benign, everything that's permitted, it's not dafka mitzvah, but it's not avera, that's all okay. No, the Rebbe says, Ella bibor shaloi mishavim b'derech memela nechashiv akravim. Dvarim shehem hefach hakdusha uminagdim l'kedusha. So if it's not full with water, if it's not full with mayim, then it's going to be filled up with snakes and scorpions, which are, the Rebbe unpacks the allegory, they are things that are opposite of Kedusha, and not only opposite, but they're minagdim. They seek to push back against Kedusha. They're opposing Kedusha. Valderech Perish Baal Shem Tov, and this is in line with the Baal Shem Tov explained on the words from Shema of Sartem Bavadatem. Ka'asher ha'adam mafrid es atzmei beHashem yizbarach. This Sartem means, and you will veer off. So the Baal Shem Tov taught that as soon as a person separates himself from Hashem, miyad hu oved avodah zarah. Instantaneously, he is serving avodah zarah, v'loi yesh davar memutza, and there is no middle ground. Okay, and this is an explanation of avodah zarah that the Rebbe teaches in many places. It's a strange kind of service. It doesn't have to be that you're bowing down to an idol, but it's already zara. It's strange from what a yid has to be and do because they veered away from what Hashem wants. In one place, the Rebbe even says that avodah zarah could be something that you did yesterday, but today you have to be on a higher level. So what you did yesterday is already for you avodah zarah. It's a lot to talk about, different explanations of Chassidus of avodah zarah, but just to explain, the Rebbe is saying there's no middle ground. V'sartem v'avadatem. As soon as you veer away from what the Eibishter wants from you, you're going to trespass on avodah zarah. And this explains why it doesn't say in full-throated manner in the pasuk itself that there are snakes and scorpions in this pit into which they threw Yosef. Ela davar nilmad, but it has to be understood. It has to be expounded from the words ein by mayim, because it is an outgrowth. Zutaitza ki zehu davar she'ein tzarich lefaret. You don't have to delineate this specifically. You don't have to say nechashim ba'kravim yesh bay. Hu taitza haba b'derech memela mikach shemayim ein bay. It is a necessary outgrowth of there not being water. There's no other way. And therefore, the Rebbe explains, that's why these two explanations are brought down by the Medrash in one hemshach, one after the other. Because the first explanation that the Medrash brings down, that there's nashim ba'akravim, is dependent on and is explained by the second, which is why are there nashim ba'akravim? Because there's no water. Why are there things that are menagi to kedusha? Because there's no Torah. And that's why it leads to things that are opposite of the Torah, specifically in this case, the sale of Yosef. Now, seemingly, we could ask, we could push back against this explanation and say, Bish lema perish abal shem tov anal al v'sartem avadetem asher hanidun boy hu etzem hakesher b'advegas yisod kadosh baruch hu. Move on. It's one thing in the explanation of the Baal Shem Tov, we understand that when you visartem, when you veer away from Hashem, what Hashem wants, it's automatically avodah zarah. We understand because we're talking about the connection and the cleaving onto Hashem by Bnei Yisrael. She'im rak sor ha'adam me'advegas b'kadosh baruch hu v'sartem harei ze kvar inishal hefech v'avadetem miyad hu oived avodah zarah al kol ponim avodah zarah b'dakos. We could understand how this works, that if you turn away from the Eibishter, then immediately and automatically it's an inyan of avodah zarah, like the Rebbe says in parentheses, at least avodah zarah on a very, very subtle level. Avol b'nidun didan. But in our case here with Yosef and his brothers, Shaboy Midubar Chisaron Hatara Mayim, Madua Muchach Hadavar Shekevon She'ain Tara Mischayeves Bederach Memele His Habas Misyosam Shal Nechashim Akravim Davar Hamanaged L'Tara. But why in our case, we're talking about Tzaddikim, we're talking about the Shvatim. So why do we have to say that if there's Ein Boy Mayim, then right away nature abhors a vacuum, and it has to be filled up with things that are menagi to kedusha? That seems very, very extreme. Gam tzarich lahavin. We also have to understand Yadua she'ache Yosef savru sheYosef mechuyev misa al pi din. It's well known. The Mefarshim explain that the brothers of Yosef, they were not Chalila, riffraff. They were the tzaddikim. They were the sons of Yaakov, mitasei shlema, and they believed that Yosef was chayav misa al pi din. They believed that Yosef was plotting to kill them. And so there's a halach in the Torah, the Rambam brings down, that if somebody is running after you, you are mechuyev to protect yourself by taking them out first. That could be one reason. There are other reasons that are brought down by the Mefarshim. For instance, they mistakenly thought that he was being married b'malchus because they saw in the future, and it's true that there was going to be much later in history a descendant of Yosef that was going to go up against the son of Shlomo HaMelech, where we have that split between Rechavam and Yeravam. But they didn't know that Yosef had to be a king before there was going to be a first king from the house of Yehuda. So that was another reason why he was chayiv misa, because he was married b'malchus. V'im kain mahu shenemar b'medrash ali dei zeh shebikshu lahargez Yosef nisroika and bayer shel Yaakov in b'divrei Torah. So if this is so, that they had good reason to do this to Yosef, so this that the Medrash says that by wanting to kill Yosef, the bar of Yaakov, the metaphoric pit of Yaakov, the space of Yaakov was drained of water, was drained of Torah. I know somebody has a question. I'm just going to finish this paragraph. How can you say that the pit of Yosef was metaphorically drained of Torah, when at the same time we know, because the Mefarshim teach us, that what the brothers of Yosef were doing was, at least in their mind, very much al pi Torah. And that's why you might remember that Rashi brings down that they made like a pact that they would excommunicate anyone that would tell Yaakov the truth, but to have a minyan, they included the Eibishter. How could you include the Eibishter unless you feel that you're 100% right? Sorry, Dina, did you want to ask something or say something? Okay, I thought maybe it was a question, but it's not. Dalet. V'yuvan, and we'll understand this. We'll understand this whole thing by first prefacing with the reason for why Chazal compare Torah to water. Now, the Rebbe explains that HaTorah nimshal lekama dvarim, that in general we have a number of metaphors for Torah. There's lechem, there's yayin, there's shemen, there's bread, there's wine, there's oil, v'chule, and there are other. V'chol echad mehem mitar geder utchuna acheres b'Torah, and each one of these describes a different category, a different characteristic of Torah. Lagabe inyan mayim shebetorah amru Chazal, but specifically about this metaphor, water, Chazal teach lama nimshlu divrei Torah lamayim. Why is Torah compared to water? Leimar lach, to teach, to tell you, ma mayim menichin mokem gavoya v'hoichin lemokem namuch. Just like water always flows down, they leave a higher place to flow down to a lower place. Af divrei Torah ein miskaimim ela b'mi shada'atoi shefela. So too, the words of Torah can only remain in a viable fashion with somebody who is humble. Kiloimar, this is to say, Shemayim einam dugma le'etzim inyan haTorah, ela lebitul v'shiflus ha'adam hanidrashim b'limud haTorah. Water doesn't describe Torah as much as it. I mean, when you compare the Torah to water, it's not talking so much about the Torah itself, but it's describing a necessary prerequisite for the person who's learning Torah and wants the Torah to stay with them. So now, once we understand what aspect of Torah Mayim is describing, now we could understand this idea that the pit of Yaakov, as it were, was drained of Divrei Torah. Ki mitzias haTorah v'dinei haTorah haisa etzlam. Because of course they studied Torah, and of course they were knowledgeable of the halachas, and they were even operating within the rubric of halacha. Ela shenedar inyan hamayim shebetorah. But what was missing was the mayim, was the humility with which you have to approach Torah. V'haborek ein boy mayim. What was missing is this aspect, and as will be further unpacked in Seif Ches. But what was missing is habitul shenidrash mehem be'erech goydel ma'alasam. Okay, and this is underscored. What was missing is the humility as compared to the greatness of their stature. Ukemuvan mehakriyos v'habitul b'hadgasha shebetfila ha'amida. And the Rebbe brings down, like for example, we can understand this from the bowing, and the bowing is an expression of humility underscored when we daven Shemona Esrei. Haseda behenhu kairea b'baruch v'zoykef b'shem. For most people, you bow when you say baruch, and you straighten yourself out when you say Hashem. Aval hamelach. But when it comes to a Jewish king, Kevon Shekara Shuv Eina Zoykef. The first time that the king would bow, he did not straighten himself out until the end of Shemona Esrei. So we see from this that the greater the person, the greater the humility that is demanded of them. And the bittul. Aval al pizetes chasei v'kushya now. So now the question is further underscored and strengthened. Ech yitachen shekasher rak ein boi mayim azai b'derech memela nechashim v'akravim yesh boi. So now that we know that it's not about, that mayim is not so much about the etzem of Torah. In other words, they had Torah, they had halacha. They didn't have the requisite level of humility and bittul. So how could it be v'chi mishum kach bilvad shehalimud nedar bittul v'shiflus tishave mitziusam shel nechashim v'akravim davar hamenaged l'nei Torah? So now once we understand what was missing by them, it just makes it even more shocking that because they didn't have the right bittul, because they didn't have the right humility, so the space, their lives, as it were, filled up with nechashim va'akravim, things that oppose kedusha and oppose Torah. Hey, v'habir bazeh, and the explanation is as follows. Iker haTorah, mashal yada al yidei alimud ba miskasher adam lenoisein haTorah. And this is a theme that the Rebbe hammers home over and over and over again, that the main thing of learning Torah is that through Torah, through learning Torah, you can connect yourself to the noisen haTorah. V'lochein, inyan habitul b'hashiflus hu tenai ikri, and therefore the inyan of having abnegation, self-abnegation and humility is not a sidebar. It's not peripheral. It is a requisite, it's a condition. Kol's mansha adam hu mitzias b'fnei atzmai harei hu adayin mugdar b'hagbaloi shel nivra. V'lachein eina mesugal iskasha el neisen haTorah shehu b'li gvul. And the Rebbe explains why it's a necessary prerequisite. It's actually, the whole study of Torah is based conditionally on the bittul, because as long as a person does not have bittul, that means that they are within the parameters of themselves. If you're in the parameters of yourself and you're a person, so you are by definition a mugbal, you're by definition extremely limited. So what, you really think that a limited entity can connect to the infinite? It's ridiculous, on its face ridiculous. It's only when the one who's studying Torah approaches this with complete self-abnegation, and in doing so exits from the necessary limitations and constrictions of a human being, only then only then is it possible to connect to the Bli Gvul, to the Eibishter. And through this we can understand what we say every day in Shemona Esrei. We say v'nafshi ka'ofar lakol tiyah. My entity, my nefesh, my being should be like dirt, like offer, like dust that doesn't say here in the words, but like that people step on. And immediately after we say psach libi b'sayar secha, open my heart with your Torah and to your Torah. Dilach seemingly halay limit Torah psach libi b'sayar secha mochrach liyos beregesh v'chayos u'bahavana v'hasaga. Seemingly, the whole idea of learning Torah, when we say psach libi b'sayar secha, has to be of necessity with feeling, with excitement, with enthusiasm, and of course, with cognitive understanding and grasping. And this can only be when the person is fully invested. But when you say that my existence should be like dust and dirt, it seemingly it seems like you're obviating and you're putting down the existence of the person. And when the person is put down, it shuts down their feelings, it shuts down their enthusiasm. And when you're not feeling it, it becomes harder to understand it. But the Rebbe says, when can there be a situation of opening our hearts to Hashem's Torah, Torah Secha, Torah Shelcha? A masa yachal adam liyas kli l'teresa shel Kadosh Baruch Hu shehi bilti mugbelas. When can a person actually be a receptacle to receive the Torah of Kadosh Baruch Hu that is without any end? Davka kasher yesh bo tchila habitul mikol v'chol loy bitul stam ela ka'ofar lakol shehakol doshin alav. It's davka only when a person approaches this with complete bittul to everybody. And not pedestrian bittul, but a bittul like you're offer lakol. Hakol doshin olav. Everybody steps on the offer. Ali de bittul zehu nase muchshar lekabel tayrasa shel kadosh baruch hu. This kind of bittul readies us and makes us proper recipients to be makabel al yedei yagata habola achar mikin al yedei yagias ha'adam b'koyach sichloi hu koilet es tayrasa shel kadosh baruch hu b'koychasev ha'pnimiyim pesach libi b'sayasecha. So that the prerequisite is v'nafshi ka'ofar lakol tiyeh, and then through our yigia, through working on it with our koyches, with our intelligence, then we're able to absorb the Torah v'kadosh baruch hu in our innermost aspects, and that's the stress on the word libi. That is not just something that we grasp cognitively, but psach libi b'sayasecha. Our hearts are open to this. Vav. And now the Rebbe says, and now that we have this basis of understanding, we can understand something that is seemingly like a wonder, like something that we would question in the halachas surrounding learning Torah. V'hainu shebedibor b'Torah yeshna mala legabe havanas haTorah. That halacha, and certainly according to Hasidus, that when you speak out words of Torah, there's a great maila, there's a superlative quality over simply understanding it, meaning reading it to yourself, sitting down and reading it to yourself. But we know that places of Torah study are noisy places. They're not the quiet libraries of the university settings. And this is by design. Hadinhu, hamahare b'divrei Torah, ein tzarich levarech. A person who only thinks words of Torah doesn't have to, before that, say the birchas haTorah, the brachas that we have to say on learning Torah in the morning. Ki hiru lo kediborhu, because thinking about it is not like speaking it out, like articulating it. V'chol ma shaloimid b'hiru lebad ve'efshar lo lahitzi b'spasa be'ena maitzi ena yetze b'limud zeh. And why don't you have to make a bracha? Because if you're only thinking about it, and you could have articulated it, and you don't, then you're not yetze in the mitzvah of limud Torah. You're not yetze b'limud zeh yidei choybas mitzvahs v'limadatem oisam, of learning and teaching others. V'yaser mizu, and even more. Havanas haTorah kshura ledibor b'Torah. Okay, so first the Rebbe brought down the halacha and nigla. Now the Rebbe is saying that Nistar, the Chassidus, teaches that the true understanding is actually connected to and contingent on articulation. Kemaimer Chazal, like the Maimer Chazal says, al pasuk chayim heim le motzei ehem. Okay, so the Chazal teach al tikri le motzei ehem ela le motzei ehem bepeh. The simple explanation is that they are a source of life for all that are found with them, meaning like Heim Chayenu v'Arech Yameinu. Okay, but Chazal teach, don't read it le matzei ehem. Those that are found with Torah. Ela le matzei ehem bepeh. Those that are articulated orally. V'im arucha leirak bepeh ela b'ramach evarim shelcha mishtameres. V'im lav ena mishtameres. And more than just simply articulating it with your mouth, if it becomes set, if it actually impacts all of the ramach evarim shelcha, your entire body, your entire being, then it's mishtameres. Then it has viability. Then it's lasting. It has a lasting effect. But if not, if it's just something that remains in the cognitive sphere, and even if it's articulated, it still has to come down and suffuse the entire body. Seemingly, כשאדם מדבר דברי תורה, מהתורה שבעל פה, ואינו מבין מה שמעתי בפיו, פסק דין הוא בשולחן ערוך שאינו נחשב לימוד כלל. The halacha is that if you're learning Torah sheba'al peh, and you don't understand what you're saying, then this is not considered learning at all. Kiloimar, she'inyan halimud b'Torah sheba'al peh, toichnehu havana b'davar hanilmud. V'im kein, lama negea kol kach hadibar b'Torah. So, just to step back for a moment, when it comes to Torah shebachtav, if a Yid says words of Torah shebachtav and has no idea what it means, but simply articulating those words, he is yaitze in the mitzvah of limud Torah. But when it comes to Torah sheba'al peh, it has to be understood. So now the Rebbe is asking, v'im kach, lama negea kol kach hadibar b'Torah. So we have this halacha. So why is it so important for it to not only be understood, havana, but it has to be articulated b'dibur? V'ad ketei kach she'im hadavar chaser azay lo yidai she'ein tzarich levarech ve'ein yotzi dei chayvas mitzvos libatem ma'isam ela gam eina mishtameres afilu havanas haTorah eina mishtameres eslai. So why is it that not only if you don't articulate it, then you don't need to make a bracha? You don't need to make a bracha because you were not yetzer the mitzvah. And not only that, but that which you did understand, you won't keep it. It won't be mishtameres. It won't achieve viability in the sense that you will remember this. Why? Why such a strong emphasis on the articulation thereof? Bahasbara bazehi kanal. But the explanation is as said above. Ha'ikar b'Torah hu hakesher shenasa al yidei haTorah el noisen haTorah. The main thing of learning Torah is the connection that is forged between the one who is learning and the giver of the Torah, Kadosh Baruch Hu. V'lachein, gam limud haTorah muchrach liyos ba'ofen shehahavana v'hahasaga v'inyan hanilmud hein like if you mitzad gedra sichle shel nivra ela k'moshu mitzad Kadosh Baruch Hu Torasei shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. The reason why the limud has to emerge from a place of absolute bittul is as said above, because when you learn it, it has to be a learning that is coming not from within the rubric or the metric of your own cognition, because that is so limited, but rather it has to be in the way that the Torah is given mitzad HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It has to be Torah soy. Move on, and from this is understood. So it's not enough that there should be this modality of bittul, of self-abnegation, that prefaces the learning of Torah. It's not only that this must be the prerequisite, but the learning itself has to be with a constant state of bittul. And therefore, it's necessary that it should be articulated, and even more than this, and higher level than this, that it should be ordered. It should be something that pervades all the ramach evorim of the person. The Rebbe explains, because when a person learns Torah, but just with the koyach hasechel, just with their intelligence, with their cognition, hamayla el yoinish ba'adam, and this is the highest aspect of our intelligence, is the highest aspect of this of the self. Nishar hu adayin b'mitzius sheloi ka'adam ve'enu yochel liklik v'sarasa shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then the person remains very much a mitzias, because where are we a mitzias? Our toes don't feel mitzias. Our spleen doesn't feel mitzias. Our heart doesn't feel mitzias. It's in the mind that we feel the self. Ubemichol shekain b'kal v'chaymer, the Rebbe says, let me give you an example, and then we infer from this example how impossible it is for a person to learn Torah without the complete bittul. It's more impossible than pila de ayil bekufa de machta. It's more impossible than an elephant going through the eye of the needle. Uma pil afshehu mugbal hine kevon shekupa de machta kotan mimenu mufrach hadavar legamer sheyuchal likonis bekupa de machta ad she'ein marim kein lo adam afilu b'chalayim. The Rebbe says madach that a elephant, even though the elephant is limited, but it's so much bigger than the eye of a needle that even in a dream, when a person's consciousness is suspended, even in a dream, they wouldn't see such a crazy thing because it's mufrach lagamri. It's completely impossible. Alachas kama v'kama shahatayra kshur al kadosh baruch hu shashuei hamelech batzmusai. How much more so when you're talking about the Torah? The Torah is connected to Hashem. What kind of connection? It's the plaything. It's the pleasurable thing of Hashem's atzmos. Habli gvul ha'amiti. This is the ultimate infinity. Bivadai eina yechayla likones ulihitafes b'sichle shel adam mudad umukbal. Sorry. So for sure, the Torah v'Kadosh Baruch Hu is not able to enter in or to be grasped through the seichel of a person who is by definition measured and limited. Ulefichach eina mishtameres. And that's why it will not have staying power. It doesn't keep. It's not possible for Torah to have staying power in a person when the person still remains within the confines of their self-existence. The Gemara relates about a certain Talmid Chacham that he used to learn belachash quietly. He did not articulate his in learning. Shachach Talmudai. He forgot everything that he learned. Masha came, but in contradistinction, kasher limud nasa gam al yedei hapeh va'af lemata mikach al yedei ramach ivarim. But when the learning happens through the agency of the mouth, and even more so through the lower aspects of the person, the 248 limbs, shehim lemata ma'aseichel ma'alas ha'adam, and these are aspects of the person that are lower than the seichel being the zenith of the human being. So this is happening in a way where the person kind of descends from their high and mighty perch within the self, and they come down to the fullness of their body. You're mevatel your intelligence. As dafka yechayla teirasa shel Kadosh Baruch Hu habilti mugbeles lihikolet by bepnimius teirasa mishtameres. Only then can the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, be grasped and integrated with the pnimius of the person in a way that it becomes mishtameres. It has staying power. Ches. I'll please then move on. Heitev. Through this, we're now going to be able to understand better. We'll understand Maimer Chazal, Mayim Ein Boy, Aval Nechoshev Akrovim Yesh Boy. Ukenal. And as said above, Haperish Bazeh Shehu She'im Reik Mayim Ein Boy. If it's empty, if there's no water, Azai B'derech Memela Nechoshim Akrovim Yesh Boy. So now we're in a position to understand this from a much deeper place. Because the only way to fuse a connection, to forge a connection with the Noisen HaTorah is only through the bittul of the one who is learning. So there is no middle ground. If there's bittul, then you align yourself with the Noisen HaTorah in a true way. You align yourself with the will of the Eibishter that gave the Torah. Aval im hamayim habitul shebetorah nedorim chas v'shalom. But if chas v'shalom, the bittul is lacking, it's missing, azay cheser lo hashaychus l'noisen haTorah. Ubemikol shekein b'kal v'chomer mipila da'ayel b'kuva d'machta canal. Then you're completely missing the connection to Torah. And it's even more impossible to forge a connection to Torah than it is for an elephant to go through the eye of a needle. Umemela. And therefore, al derech, in the same way that Baal Shem Tov taught, visartem, and you will veer, umiyad vavaditem, as soon as you veer from the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you will be serving Avodah Zarah. Immediately, if there's mayim ein boy, then there's nechashav akravim yesh boy. There's no a little bit pregnant, either yes or no. K'maimer Chazal leitimatzei begasei ruach. Like the Chazal teaches, Hashem says, I cannot be found with the arrogant. Ela bekachu af menaged lektusha. But it's not just that it's impossible to learn Torah, that the Eibush is not there, but it becomes a menaged. It becomes something that opposes. K'maimer Chazal. Ein ani v'hu yecholen lador ba'elam. Kadosh Baruch Hu says about the arrogant person, he and I cannot live together. V'yaser mizu ki ilu oived avodas kachavim. Kafar be'ikar. It's like you serve Avodah Zarah and you are repudiating in everything that is important about Torah. Vavadetem. It's Avodah Zarah. And now we're circling back to apply this to the brothers of Yosef. The Chazal say that the pit of Yaakov was emptied out, there was no divrei Torah. This should not be understood as saying that they did not have Torah chas v'shalom. Hainu etzem halimut. But the essence of learning Torah was completely missing. Yeah, they had Torah. Yes, they knew the din. And according to their mistaken calculation, Yosef was chayav misa. But there was something that was awry. Why did they come to that mistaken understanding? Because they didn't have the water. Be'erech goydel ma'alasam. Relevant to their greatness. Inyan hamayim shebetorah habitul v'lachein psak din shalahem b'negei la'inish Yosef lo yehayam b'chuva. And that's why their psak din was not al pi hakavana. Because they were lacking the launching pad for being able to learn Torah. Hasipur mishabaparshasenu edes mu'urayis Yosef va'echav hem hakdama legolus ugeulas Mitzrayim. We know that the stories in our parsha concerning all of the events surrounding Yosef and his brothers.
Rivki,
yes.
Before you go further, can I ask just one question?
Sure.
Why is it called Borer Shel Yaakov and not Borer of the sons of Yaakov? Why is it missing in Yaakov and not in his sons?
I think just like we say mitasoi shlema.
Yes.
It's so Borer Shel Yaakov are his children, like Borer Shel each one of us. Hopefully Hashem blesses us with a borer. That's how I understand it, like in the family of, in the space of.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but that's the way I'm understanding it. If somebody has a different explanation, please. So the stories in our parsha about the events surrounding Yosef and his brothers are the hakdama. They're the preface to the galus, and then after that the geula from Mitzrayim. Shari mechiras Yosef havilo liyividas Yaakov v'vanu Mitzrayim, because the sale of Yosef led to Yaakov and his sons coming down to Mitzrayim. Asher tachlisam hi inin matan Torah, and the whole reason they came down was the inyan that would come afterwards, matan Torah. V'cheinu gam b'negei inin mayim. And we're going to apply the same Yerida L'Tzerech Aliyah to this idea that there was no water, but there were snakes and scorpions. that the Torah teaches us, asher negeyahu lichlalos ha'inyan shel matan Torah, that this inyan of habar reik, if there isn't the proper bittul and there isn't the proper humility, then this is negeya to the whole central idea of Matan Torah. Ki inyan hamayim sheb'Torah habitul hanidrash mehaloimed kedei sheyiskasher el noisen Torah his chadesh beikar b'Matan Torah. Because this whole paradigm that in order to learn Torah, it has to come from a place of bittul, that all began with Matan Torah. That is a novelty of Matan Torah. How so? The difference between the learning of the avos before Matan Torah and the learning of Torah by all of us children, starting from after Matan Torah, who the difference is as follows. Before Matan Torah, Limud HaTorah was with the koyach that each person had. Midas hasagosoi shel haloimed b'Torah hisera kechol sheyish b'koyach nivra litfos lahavin. The extent to which Torah could be grasped was entirely dependent on that person's ability to understand and grasp. V'hachidush shel Matan Torah hu. And the chidush, the novelty of Matan Torah is v'nasan lanu es teirasai. HaTorah k'misha hu teirasai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sha'ashuye hamelech b'atzmusai. Nitna al yidei HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'chol Yehudi. Kimuvan gam mipsak hadin shekol Yehudi u'b'chol yom mechuyev b'amiras b'chas HaTorah. So the chidush of Matan Torah was that it was no longer going to be contingent on the individual and their capacity, but rather it was given as a matana. The Eibishter's Torah, it's two things here. It's Teirasai, it's on one hand, the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all of the implications thereof, and on the other hand, it's given to every Jew, and we understand this from the Psak Halacha, that even a Jew who has no intention of studying Torah that day is still mechuyev to say the bracha. In other words, it's a gift that keeps on giving, and it's not contingent on the kelim that we're putting out for it, and it's certainly not contingent on our abilities. And through this, we can understand a Gemara that says, "Betchila hayamoshe loy mitara umeshakcha ad shenitna loy b'matana." At first, Moshe would learn Torah and he forgot it until it was given to him b'matana. Dilach ayat tamua. Seemingly, there's a big wonder here. Gam lifnei matan Torah lamdu Torah k'divrei Chazal mimeyan shel avosenu lo parsha yeshiva mehem. Much before Matan Torah and before Moshe, people were learning Torah, like the Chazal teach, again a Gemara, that from the days of our forefathers, there was never a cessation in a yeshiva. There was always a yeshiva. There was always a study of Torah. Very pshita sheim lo yishakchu es limudam, ubefrat sheim lo yikein ein makam lelimud ba'ofen shel yeshiva. For sure, they didn't forget it. The Rebbe doesn't say this, but I'm understanding this. If they would have forgotten it, then there wouldn't have been any tradition. And we know the tradition did trickle down. And definitely, you can't refer to it as yeshiva, because yeshiva means that there's an institution where people are sitting and learning this. So if before Matan Torah there were people that were learning, and they were learning in a, let's just say, substantial way, because it's referred to as a yeshiva, and we have to say that logic compels that it wasn't all forgotten. How could it be that Dafka by Moshe, La'achri Matan Torah, there should be this Indian, the possibility of forgetting? The explanation is the learning of Torah was in a way that is relative to the creatures that were learning the Torah. It was let's just say, in their toolbox. And therefore, it could be integrated in their inner landscape in a substantial way, in an inner way. But when you compare and contrast this to Matan Torah, Kadosh Baruch Hu nasan l'Moshe as Torah. But with Matan Torah, the Eibishter gave a very different iteration of the Torah. It was Torah. It was his Torah, like the Rebbe says, Atzmus, Sha'ashue Atzmusay. It was the plaything of the Eibishter. The deepest part of the Eibishter is in it. And so once that happens, there is no way that a human being can integrate this knowledge on their own steam. And that's why the Gemara says that Moshe learned it and he forgot it. So it seems that this was what the Eibishter was teaching Moshe on high before Moshe gave it to Bnei Israel. Because it was until the Eibishter gave it through the particular conduit of a gift. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Kol Yachol, but when you're talking about the Eibishter, who is Nimna HaNimnais, that it's impossible for anything to be impossible for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, the Eibishter could fuse together the infinite with the finite. Nasan es Teirasai, Habilti Mugbelas, Nitna Loi. And not just Nitna Loi, not only did the Eibishter give the infinite Torah to a person, to Moshe, and we know V'chol HaNoisim Ba'ayin Yafa Noisin, and we're taught that when you're giving a present, it comes from a place of Ayin Yafa. It comes because you want to give. So you give generously. B'derech matana, shenyana davar haba lemekabel loy mipnei sheshilem shavyav. And we know that a matana, what's the meaning of a matana? That you get something that you're not deserving of. You didn't pay for what it's worth. And who did the Eibishter give this tremendous matana to? Lenivra mugbal, to a finite person. V'cheinu gam b'negei l'chol Yehudi. Sheteirasei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu nikletes by bepnimius mishtameres lefi shenasan lanu es teirasei HaKadosh Baruch Hu nasna loy b'derech matana. And this is true for every Jew, that the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu can be absorbed and integrated bepnimius, on a deep level, and therefore is mishtameres. It has staying power because the Eibishter gave it to us. It's a present. It's not something we deserve. It's not something we necessarily could have acquired on our own. That's the inyan of a present. Uleidach, on the other hand, even though Jews are able to quote unquote, very important, the quotes are the strongest and most important part of this word, that even though Bnei Israel are able to quote unquote grasp the Torah through our Kayach HaSeichel. Why? Because the Eibishter gave it to us, and they were able to also grasp through our Kayach the Noisan HaTorah, Kadosh Baruch himself, Mikol Makoim. And yet, at the same time, Behechrech Sheyeh Gam Bitul Adam, and at the same time, there has to be complete abnegation. So on one hand, it can't be, the Eibishter did not want that we should just say, Eibishter, we're just fleeting here today, gone tomorrow, ephemeral creatures. We can never understand what you're saying. Just tell us what to do and just tell us how high to jump and we'll do it. No, the Eibishter wanted dafka that we should learn. And we should learn with our seichel. And at the same time, with complete bittul. Because the intention is shakabolas kolen yonim hanalim tagil Yisrael al yedei avoda dafka. Why does it have to be that we should learn Torah? Why? It's such a messy and also a very, very dangerous experiment, right? Especially those of us on campuses know what it looks like when people study Torah and they're not at all connected to the Nisan HaTorah. It's not pretty. So why did it have to be that we should have to engage in this altogether? It should seem to be impossible. But the Eibishter wanted that it should come to us through Avodah Dafka, v'loi ba'ofen shel nama dichsufa, and it shouldn't come in a way of the shame that comes with getting bread that is given out of pity. V'lachein muchrach ha'adam lasa is davar ma mitzidoi. So therefore, we have to do something. In other words, whatever we do is just really an obfuscation of the truth of what's happening. We have to make some kind of overture. Davar ma. Ki al yidei zeh ye'aseh ra'ui b'mida mesuyemes likleit es teresa shel Kadosh Baruch Hu, because through this we become, to some extent, a proper vessel for being able to receive and integrate the Torah of Kadosh Baruch Hu. V'zois al yidei inyan habitul shebe'emtzuosoi. And this is only possible through bittul, and through the agency of the bittul, we leave our own sense of self. We therefore leave our own limitations, and we're able to receive the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So if I understand correctly, Moshe Rabbeinu was being taught the Torah post Matan Torah, before Matan Torah, and that's why he needed this gift from Hashem. Is that correct?
That's how I understand it.
Okay, so
I that's how I understand it. This is what I got when asking others, because
okay, so just something that I'm just wondering about. It seems like there's a parallel. So after Matan Torah, when we do mitzvahs, we have this ability to uplift the Gashmis through our mitzvahs, where before Matan Torah we didn't. It seems like similar to this idea that the Torah would be forgotten
100%
until you integrate it.
Exactly, because it's the inyan of being able to bring down Atzmos. And only in Atzmos can you have the fusion of Gvul and Bilti Gvul. Only in Atzmos.
But it seems, though, that with mitzvahs, let's say, we don't really have to do anything to effectuate that we can impact the Gashmis. We just do it. But with Torah, if you don't have the bittul, then you still miss that boat. Is that true?
I think that the reason for that is, and I could be wrong, and anybody who understands definitely please chime in, but I think the reason for that is because actions are b'derech memela, from action items can be done even when your whole mind is not invested in it. In other words, when you look, how many things do you do from a place of bittul without even thinking about it? It's not like, okay, I'm going to be mevatel myself now, I'm going to diaper my baby. I'm going to be mevatel myself, and I'm going to pick up that napkin that somebody threw on the floor. I'm going to be mevatel myself. I'll never forget once I was like 9 months pregnant, like 3 days before delivery, and a student was showing me where on the floor there was more dirt that I should sweep up. But these are things that we do. B'derech memela, there's already that built-in bittul. Masha'en kain, when you're talking about learning is very much something that takes place in our cerebral orbit, and that's like the highest aspect of the self. And it could be very much about an ego trip. It could be very much about, I enjoy this, like the Greek philosophers, like do as I say, not as I do, and so on and so forth.
So just the action of doing a mitzvah by default is kind of subduing yourself to what Hashem wants.
That's it. That's what it is.
Okay.
Like a concept the Rebbe brings down, ilu tziva lanu lachtiv eitzim. And if the Eibusher would have told us that we have to hack wood, we have to split wood, so that would be the mitzvah. Like, really, you're walking around with 4 types of vegetation on Sukkos. This is not coming from a place of your understanding. Pikola now move on gama kesher be maimer chazal mayim ein boy v'chulei le'inyan Chanukah. So now we circle back to the very beginning how is this connected to Hanukkah? Now, remember that the Rebbe said that this limud about Mayim Ein Boy is found in the Gemara, Dafka, in a sugya where it's talking about Hanukkah. What's the connection? Yeah, there is a much more superficial explanation, and that is that the Baal Mamre said both of these things. But there's a deeper explanation. Yadua hezber b'dir kaloshim b'nusach v'al hanisim. It's very well known. Chassidus speaks about this in so many different places. The specificity of what it says in al hanisim. Kishamda malchus yavan harsha v'chule lahashkicham Torah secha v'chule. Shahivanim bikshu lahashkiach mi Yisrael lo yas etzem hachachma v'asechel shebetorah. The Greeks were not looking to eradicate from us the ideas of Torah. They did not want to cut us off from learning Torah generally. Ella, Torah Hashem. What they attacked was the transcendent element of Torah. That is the Torah of Hashem. Timu kol hashmanu shebehechel, and that's why they didn't break the glass jars, the oil. They didn't break them. They made them impure. I think so often about this image of troops from this very powerful, vaunted army, and what are they standing and doing there? They're painstakingly taking off the seal of the Kohen Gadol. It's like such a fascinating image. And by the way, must have taken a lot of bittul on their part from their commander who told them to do such a thing, because it's easier. They could have just had fun and smashed them against the wall. V'lo avdu es hashmanim. They didn't make that the oil should go bye-bye, that it should be lost. The shemen hu b'chinas chachma. And Chassidus teaches constantly that shemen is the idea of chachma. It's a metaphor for chachma. Hayuvanim hiskimu sheitzol Yisrael yishar hashemen hachachma v'limun Torah. The Greeks were, or the Greek Syrians, whatever you want to call them, they were okay. They were okay with the Jews having oil, with the Jews having the chachma and the study of Torah. Aval ratzu sheyezeh shemen tameh chas v'shalom. But what they were looking for was to make it impure. And what does it mean to make it impure? What does it mean to pollute it? That it should not be connected to the holiness of the Torah. It shouldn't be connected to the Noisen HaTorah. This is one of the reasons why the Eibishter made this miracle, that a small cruse of pure oil should be found, an untouched little cruse of oil. Because the truth of the matter is that al pi halacha, if the whole nation has only this, then they would be able to use it. It would have been permitted. So even though halachically there was a way out, and they could have lit with the tamei oil if that was all that was available, but no. They made that they should find one little pitcher of oil, one little bottle of oil, however it was packed, and that this should remain for the entirety of Hanukkah, because the Nitzachin is about Torah Secha. The Rebbe Kachsach very much about the difference between Purim and Hanukkah. Purim is about the destruction of the body. Hanukkah is about attacking the spirit. The whole idea of Hanukkah was for them to attack the spirit, Torah Secha, Shemen Tahar. And so to now go back to what was said before about there's no water, it's dafka through the humility. That is the only way that we can guard against the metaphoric snakes and scorpions. And And it's the same thing with Hanukkah. Shedafka al yidei hadlakas neres Hanukkah shemen tahar. That is dafka through the mitzvah of lighting the Hanukkah menorah with pure oil. Because every time we light, it's a remembrance of this emphasis on the purity of the oil. Kal yarigla de tarmudai. So the Gemara asks, until when can you light the menorah? So the Gemara answers, until the traffic ceases in the shuk, in the marketplace. So the Gemara goes back and pushes against that and says, well, when is the traffic in the marketplace considered to be completely seized? And the Gemara answers, Kal yarigla de tarmudai, until the people from Tadmor stop walking in the marketplace. Why? Because the people from Tadmor were the people that sold kindling wood. And so even when all the other vendors in the market went home already, because everybody had presumably bought the fish or the meat or the baked goods or whatever that they were buying, but people can sometimes need kindling wood late at night and realize that they ran out or they don't have enough, etc. So now the Rebbe says, Chassidus teaches that Tarmud oisius meredes, that this geographic location called Tarmud is also an allusion to the idea of rebelling against Hashem. For as long as there is some deficit in the inyan of the purity of the oil, in the inyan of humility, there is still the possibility for rebelling against God. It's still the possibility of visartem v'avadetem, that you will serve chas v'shalom idols. But by lighting candles of Hanukkah, and where originally I was supposed to light outside in front of our house, like they still do in places in Israel, but the emphasis is on chutzah, that it should illuminate the outside. Azai, then al pi Chasidus, then kalya rigla de tamidoi. Then you completely consume, you stop the possibility for rebellion. Gam min hashuk, even from the public thoroughfare, the marketplace of ideas. Betachlis hashlemus, and this happens in a complete way. Hainu shadavar mechala legamri is inyan meredes, by approaching the inyan of Torah properly, by using only the pure oil, you completely destroy, you consume, you obviate completely the possibility of rebellion. It's not just that you obviate rebellion like on the level of cognition or the feelings, but there's no rebellion at all, even rigla, even on the foot level. Until we completely, the Eibusha completely irradiates the darkness of the Golus and brings practically the Geula Hamitis V'Hashlema and Shabi Bekarav Mamash. So that's our sikha for today. And again, for Shlema, Nisiv, Harav Yosef Yitzchak Batzima Chasya, and all of the people that need a refuah shlema, and for all of our soldiers, and for all of the people in Eretz Yisrael, and for all of us all over the world.
Amen. And Rivki, I mean, I could look back in the Sikha. I must have missed it. But I don't understand. If it was given as a gift, the Torah, that means that we don't need to have that the bittul is not necessary today. When we learn Torah, like I got lost there.
Okay, the gift part is our ability to be makabel Torah. Before Matan Torah, it was only al-pi the seichel and hasaga of each individual person. The novelty of Matan Torah is that it was Torah soy Shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. It was the Torah in untrammeled fashion. And that's why